Namaste. The word real and surreal have fascinating and esoteric journey. Salvador Dali to Lacan, it has been a discourse of intense and imaginary ardor. Opening up the journey into the surreal today, we have with the psychoanalysis consultant, Mr. Himanshu Vaidya. Namaste, sir.
Namaste.
So, can you start with the meaning of the term real?
Everyday meaning of the word real goes into saying that something is real in the sense something is objectively existing or something is imaginary. That's the everyday use of the word real. So I can say this computer in front of me is real, but the laptop that I imagine in my visualization is not real. So what objectively exists is real. The entities which exist in imagination are not real. That is everyday understanding of the word real. Second meaning of the word real comes from the philosophic understanding of the word. In philosophy, we say that what we see in front of us is the manifest entity, but is there something more fundamental, the essence or the essential part of it, which is the reality, which is behind these appearances? So the fundamental constituent entity which manifests in terms of all that we see around us, that fundamental essential quantity, or sorry, the fundamental essential entity is called real in that sense of the term. In the sense we say, we talk about the ultimate reality, the essential reality, the fundamental reality, right? That which is real versus that which is manifest. So there the term real is used in a more essential sense. Third meaning of the word real for our purposes comes from Lacan. So for Lacan, the first period of the infant's life is where the imagination and the symbolization through language has not started. And therefore, that period of the mind's life is a period that Lacan classifies or categorizes as real. So for Lacan, there are three orders of the psyche: the real, the imaginary, the symbolic. And the real is that which is the first order to begin with. So for him, the word real means something that is pre-linguistic and pre-imaginative in his sense of the word. So that is the third meaning of the word real. And the fourth meaning, which is the meaning that we will be using in our discussion, is the psychoanalytic meaning of the word real. And the psychoanalytic meaning of the word real associates with the phrase reality testing or reality acceptance. So when in normal psychoanalytic discourse we say real, we mean the reality orientation of something. That are we living with reality acceptance and reality orientation, or are we living in a world of expectations and fantasies? So that is a more psychoanalytic meaning of the word real. And this meaning, uh, I will refine a bit to say that the real is that which pertains to the vanilla biological reality of survival and reproduction. So that part of human life, essentially psychological life, which pertains to the vanilla zone of survival and reproduction. So those thoughts, those ideas, those feelings which pertain to survival and reproduction in its bare form, without the embellishment of imagination or without the embellishment of taste and juice, but a pure biological drive for survival and reproduction. So this pure biological drive of survival and reproduction and associated thoughts and behavior and feelings. This is what constitutes the real for our discussion, and everything that is not real in the psychological life essentially can be defined by negation to be the surreal.
That's a very crisp definition of surreal. But can you elaborate as to how do you define surreal?
One way to define surreal is to say all that is not real is surreal. It's a definition by negation. And when we say all that is not real, by that we mean anything not related to the bare zone of survival and reproduction. So let us say uh, for survival, if I get ideas of how to save myself from the lion, and I am not thinking of creating uh, any sophisticated weapons which can be aesthetic in nature, which I can also use to impress others. I am looking only at the sticks and the axes and tools. I am in the zone of the real. But the moment I think about sophisticated guns which I can carry on the shoulder and impress others, I have gone into the zone of the surreal. So things which are related, thoughts, ideas, behavior related to the bare survival and reproduction constitute the real. Everything else constitutes the surreal. Now this surreal uh, has predominant element of imagination, taste, and pleasure. So, imagination, taste, and pleasure are the three entities which sort of pervade the whole surreal, and the surreal pervades most of our psyche. So, today, if you feel hungry, you just don't look forward to the bare survival food. You look forward to something that you want, something that is of a good brand, something that is coming from a very elitist restaurant. So even the biological drives of survival and reproduction are not satisfied in its bare form, but satisfied in its embellished surreal form. So the surreal is that zone of reality where that zone of the mind where imagination, taste, and pleasure, they play a predominant part in the psychological activity, and this constitutes a predominant part of the psyche. In fact, we live in the surreal all the time unless there is a crisis, or in some certain exceptional circumstances, like you go to meet the chartered accountant, or you go to meet the lawyer, you go to meet a doctor, and there is some pressing situation, or there is a biological problem, or there is a security issue. Only then we are in the real. Otherwise, 99% of our lives, we are in the surreal.
So, is it fair to say that surreal is something similar to fantasy, or it is fantasy?
It is different. And that is why I have coined this new word. Because the word surreal and fantasy were used differently in two different areas. Till now, the word fantasy was used predominantly in psychoanalysis, and there we talked about two types of fantasies. The fantasies which have come up either in daydreams or night dreams, and fantasies which are in the unconscious mind which have never come up, the fantasies we write with PH. So we were essentially talking about unconscious fantasies, fantasies in dreams, and fantasies in daydreaming. These three entities were covered by the word fantasy. Parallelly, the word surreal was used typically in the area of arts, and particularly with the school called Surrealism, founded by Salvador Dali. So this surreal was used to denote or connote or point towards a zone which was very dreamlike, imaginative, non-existent, esoteric, almost a strange and unbelievable kind of zone that you encounter while you are asleep or you are fantasizing. So that was the meaning of the word surreal. Now, what I have done is I have expanded the meaning of the word surreal in the way that I am using it. And the way I am using it, the word surreal uh, contains one category of entities, which is the fantasies, the day fantasy, the dream fantasy, and the unconscious fantasies. So the fantasies, as we understand in psychoanalysis, constitute one category. The second category is the category of art, literature, films, surreal paintings, the whole of art, not only surreal paintings, the whole of art which is based on imagination, on rasa, on juice. In Indian aesthetics, we would call it rasa, right? On this psychological juice uh, and imagination. So this is the second category of entities, which is literature and arts. And the third category of entities is the surreal as it works in our everyday thinking. That there is a dramatist inside of all of us, a surreal dramatist in the unconscious mind. And the way the unconscious mind operates is that when we think, some element of the surreal always pervades into our thinking. So may not be thinking about art and literature. We may not be thinking about the fantasies of psychoanalysis. We may be thinking something about politics. We may be thinking something about even medicine. But even in that thinking, the thinking is not prose. There is a poetic, surreal element that enters into that thinking at an unconscious, very subtle levels. And therefore, when I use the word surreal, it contains all these three categories, these three baskets of categories. One, the basket of three fantasies: daydreams, night dreams, unconscious fantasies. And this includes free associations and the related cousin brothers and sisters of them. So this is one basket. The second basket is this whole area of art, literature, corporate communication, and everything. Advertising, brand management, product management, this the surreal element in this whole category. And the third is the more subtle part, that even when we are thinking, right, and we want to think logically, almost as though we want to do only prose and no poetry, and yet the surreal intrudes unknowingly into the process. So these three baskets, all the three are covered by the word surreal, the way I define and use it in our discussion.
So, sir, is the surreal same as Laka's symbolic order?
No, it is different. The
Okay,
difference
how?
is this. Yeah, the difference is this. Uh, Laka conceptualizes three zones of the psyche: the real, the imaginary, and the symbolic. Now, uh, the way I define surreal, the surreal is present in all the three zones, because even in the real, where we say imagination is not there and uh, the symbolic order of language is not there, even then in the real, it is not everything that relates to only survival and reproduction in its bare form that exists. In the real also, there is quite an element of drama. There's quite an element of historicity, of exaggeration, of the theatrical discourse going on. So the eternal dramatist inside of us is present in all the three zones. of the real, the symbolic, and the imaginary. Right? I mean, the real, the imaginary, and the symbolic. And therefore, the surreal is present in all the three zones. So it is not that the Lacan's real is my real and Lacan's imaginary and symbolic orders put together is my surreal. That is not the equivalence. The definition of surreal, the way I have given, it comes out that the surreal is present in all the three zones of Lacan's conceptualization. The real, the imaginary, and symbolic. In all the three, there is real, and in all the three, there is surreal, the way I define the real and the surreal.
Can you give us a few examples of surreal?
Uh, Surreal is everywhere. It is inside everywhere and it is outside everywhere. There is no escape from the surreal for an ordinary person like you and me. So
Okay.
inside the surreal is everywhere and outside the surreal is everywhere. To take a few examples, uh, paintings, surreal paintings, right? Nothing can be more literally surreal than the surreal paintings. It's one of the most explicit and loud forms of the surreal. Then look at the arts and literature. Art and literature is completely another form of, another very good example of something which is soaked in the surreal. The third is, take for example, mythology. Mythology is soaked in the surreal. Take the whole example of poetry, songs, and music. It is again soaked in the surreal. Take corporate communication. The moment you go out of the house, everywhere you see hoardings, you see advertisements, you see advertisements on television. All of that is soaked in the surreal. And inside, when you look, inside you see your dreams, your daydreams, your night dreams, your right. All of them are constantly always on. Whenever we get time and we don't have any pressure on our minds, we start fantasizing. So, and the fantasizing that we do inside is quite dramatic. It's not clinical thinking, it's very dramatic thinking. It's full of theater, it's full of emotion, it's full of surrealism.
Yes.
So, the surreal is everywhere inside and the surreal is everywhere outside. And we find examples of the surreal everywhere around us and inside of us. Even a small thing like if you have to go out in the evening, we dress up in a way so as to impress everyone else. And with that dressing up, there are so many unconscious fantasies at play. We may not be conscious of those fantasies, but they would be at play. Even this in this program, the way I am using language, there is a implicit intention that the language should be good, it should be impressive, it should be aesthetic. And that is an element of surreal in the discourse about the surreal.
So, is it easy to free oneself from the surreal, or it will always be with us?
For an ordinary individual, freeing oneself from the surreal in an absolute sense is not possible. One can reduce the hold of the surreal on oneself. And that does not mean that one says goodbye to the surreal, but one develops a mastery over the surreal. One can use or not use the surreal on demand. Why is it so difficult for an ordinary person to be free from the surreal? Is this one, psychoanalysis tells us that we all live in reality and fantasy both. And no person can shut off one's fantasies for the simple reason that our desires are infinite and these desires cannot be met. And the unmet desires cannot be silenced. So the unfulfilled desires uh, keep singing loudly, which comes up in the form of these fantasies, and we cannot, by a conscious will, put an end to these fantasies. That is one part. The second part is uh, it is our hardware that we want pleasure, juice, aesthetics, and taste. And it is so strongly embedded in our hardware that these are some of the fundamental desires of the system, and therefore we cannot be free from the surreal. Third, it is so pleasurable that we dare not be free from the surreal because we want the pleasure of the surreal. And fourth, when we talk about that subtle surreal, which is the real subtle and difficult thing, and more important for psychoanalysis and psychotherapy, which happens at very unconscious level, in the way thoughts are generated in the unconscious and the pre-conscious, and how the surreal insidiously seeps into the thinking process and dramatizes and makes loads the thinking process, the logical, bare logical thinking process with emotion, with pleasure, with histrionicity, with dramatization, with desire. How that loading happens unconsciously, that is so subtle and so uh, deep at the level of our awareness that very few people can even understand it, or even fewer people can attempt to be free, and rarely somebody can be free because we are talking at such deeper levels of the psyche. Much of it is outside of our awareness and control. So it is not possible for an ordinary person to be free from the surreal. In Indian spiritual tradition, though some of the enlightened persons, not all of the enlightened persons, and I have to make a distinction here, that even after enlightenment, you are not free from the surreal in many cases, and certainly not free from the surreal which is operating uh, unconsciously in the insidiously seeping into the cognitive process. That part of the surreal is even more difficult to be free from, even for many enlightened people. So enlightened people in Indian spiritual traditions on this particular point can be categorized into three. One, those who are not free from the surreal, in the sense uh, the dreams, the fantasies, the uh, unconscious seeping of the surreal into the cognitive process is still there, but it is not able to overwhelm the person. So the person is not in the strange hold of them. That is one. The second is where people are free from and have mastery of the the fantasy part of the surreal, the art and literature and those parts of the surreal, but not free from the unconscious cognitive infusion, pervasiveness of the surreal. And the third is those people who are free even at that level. So there are three categories of people, and only in the third we can say it is humanly possible to be free completely from the surreal, and that constitutes a very micro minority of humanity. So for 99.999% of humanity like you and me, it is not possible to be free from the surreal. Psychoanalysis has this goal that we should be more and more in reality and less in fantasy. But the goal is an ideal, and we strive towards that goal, and we be more and more free as the strange hold of the surreal reduces, but we are never completely free.
So, how important is this concept in our day-to-day living?
It is very important, and therefore I have coined this new word. This new word and understanding behind it is not discovery of a new psychoanalytic concept or a new psychoanalytic technique. There's nothing new in the conceptual or technical sense of the term. It is a invention of a new language, and I'm doing it with a purpose because I believe by creating this new construct and this new language, we can understand better the human mind, and we can manage it better in the pathological area and the non-pathological area. When I say this, uh, the concept of the surreal, the way I have defined it and the way I will develop it further, and then others will develop it further and use it. It will help us in many ways. One way is self-knowing. We will be able to know ourselves much better. This language will enable better knowing of oneself. Second will be healing. The moment you coin the word surreal and put so much of the psychic activity into that surreal, it instantaneously creates a distance, objectivity, and a freedom from being overwhelmed by the surreal. The moment you say something is surreal, automatically a distance is created from that entity. The observational capacity increases and the ability of that entity to overwhelm you reduces. So it's a very healing process, right? It's very concept and use of the concept of the surreal. Because you know something is fantastical, nothing to be taken to heart and nothing to be feared that it will overwhelm you and do something horrible to you. You recognize vividly a fantastical entity as a fantastical entity, and that reduces the power of that entity by half. Third is,
To
sorry. Yeah. So the third is it will help us in developing further our understanding in humanities and social sciences using this concept. Fourth, it will help us to sort of create a new language and a new basket of conceptual tools in the area of psychoanalysis and psychotherapy. And fifth is um, it will help us in areas of positive psychology, developmental psychology, human potential movement, parapsychology, and spirituality. The concept, it's as it develops and is used in 100 different ways.
so has spirituality used the, the surreal in a very right and effective way?
Yes, it does. Because the moment you say something is surreal, we don't say it, call it surreal in condemnation. There is no criticism, no condemnation, no looking down, no running away, no distancing from it in the sense of avoidance. There's definitely distancing from a healing point of view, but not from an avoidance point of view. So, spirituality has the same attitude. It uses everything for spiritual growth and freedom from desire and fear, and in the interest of goodness to oneself and others. Same is true for surreal. The concept of surreal is used by spirituality in many different ways. First, it uses it for self-development in the whole area of what is called idol worship, or actually it is idol therapy. So surreal images are created, surreal mythological stories are created, practices are given for the person to live with that surreal persona, whoever that god, goddess, or a surreal entity is, under the supervision of a guru, and in that relating with that person day in and day out, which is a very complicated process, and different stages of the process are very different from each other. The self growth happens, pathology is healed, and self growth happens. I'm not saying everybody can be healed with this or everybody can be developed with this, but a group of people can be. Second, spirituality has this whole concept of Swapneshwari, and a counterpart of that in the male domain also can be there, where one creates a dream woman or a dream man and starts dreaming every day about the same person and starts relating to the same persona. And this is done under the guidance of a guru who is like a quasi therapist, not a therapist, but a quasi therapist. And as the relationship is narrated and the guidance is given, the person lives out the deepest of his unconscious desires and fears. And the time comes when the process is over, the Swapneshwari has to go. So there is this going away ceremony, or a Viday ceremony, or a Visarjan ceremony. Just as Swapneshwari is created, there is a Visarjan or there is a goodbye of that Swapneshwari. If the Swapneshwari does not go, and either the man or the guru or both together cannot handle the process, then you are loaded with a fantasy figure for quite a long time. Then the Swapneshwari becomes a Vishkanya, right? So that is second. The third is in the area of Yantra, Mantra, Tantra, and alchemy. That's an area where the surreal is used in the form of visualization, in the form of figures, in the form of mythological stories, in the form of sounds. Right? Sounds have surreal stories attached to them. Right? And then the use of hallucinogens for inducing surreal experiences or to manage the surreal in some way or the other. So spirituality as a basket full of tools to experience the surreal, draw gratification from it, use it for self-development and for spiritual growth.
Fantastic. So we have opened up today an esoteric area of surreal, and we will continue our series with many such episodes. Meanwhile, you write to us at hvindia@gmail.com, and thank you. Namaste.
Namaste.